big things local for community benefit, community ownership. One person didn't know anything about NTCA. It was good to hear about that agency as well. And then just the general use of cooperatives, co-ops, being able to work together as a group. And then general partnerships, just bringing all the different aspects of working together in one unit locally, trying to create a business or a product or whatever it may be.
All right, so for our group, co-op and other community-minded service providers giving back to the community, that can be in the form of financial contributions. It could be in the form of reinvesting in a network to further expand and reach and serve more people. Another thing that we thought about was reaching out to others to solve the problem. So something that is pretty important, I think, in our rural communities is we can't do this alone. We need each other. You might bring something to the table, I might bring something to the table, and our outcomes desired might even be different. Your desire might be different than mine, but if we can even get close to getting those, we're on a win-win. And then probably third would just be, I apologize, your name in the middle. Kevin, I think your speech on thinking about the future and your legacy and what we're doing, not for today, but for our kids or people down the line is, I think, really impactful.
Thank you. Well, we mostly talked about each other and introduced ourselves, so we were kind of surprised that the time was up. So honestly, we're scrambling to come up with our 3 items, but we did talk about how powerful a cooperative could be, and we discussed the power of 100 women in Minneapolis that get together and they vote on community projects, and each of them invest, and then they vote to decide on what they should invest in. We also talked about sort of this aha moment between getting the phone company and the electric co-op to partner to improve broadband services. Usually those 2 entities don't really talk to each other, but they definitely have a common interest in the community. And then finally, we liked the discussion that Kevin had around local investment in the community, and it is parallel to investing in schools and hospitals and the Arboretum, that investing in broadband as a community is an investment in the future of the community.
Hi, I'm Alex. I'm actually from Brooklyn, New York, and I work at a small nonprofit, and we actually help more on the adoption side of broadband, so we help people over 60 get online. So, maybe I'm a little bit of fish out of water, I'm far away, there's snow coming in October, not used to that. But for me, what struck me is, when the infrastructure is there, there are still communities and populations that may not have the skills to use it. So, I'm wondering what, and obviously there might not be one answer, but what kind of strategies and what people are doing to get people online once the technology or the broadband is there. A lot of our work in New York and northern New York State now, which is very rural, and that's part of the reason I'm here, we work a lot to get people online and get them understanding how to use technology once broadband is brought into their area. So that was kind of the one thing we thought of.
Hello, we're kind of like the table over there. We're discussing kind of what we all do, and next thing you know, the bell rang. So we only have a couple written down, but one of them that came up right away was if you can avoid it, don't overbuild a current provider. We see a little bit of that. That's happened in some locations, and some locations it hasn't really worked out very well. It's not, very, I shouldn't say profitable, but it's not very efficient. So, and the other one is Kevin that was sitting next to me. I liked the alternatives he had as working as a community, developing co-ops, and kind of working together to build out, whatever you're looking to do. I mean, networks or or just basic infrastructure, what have you. Think outside the box. So.
Hello, I'm Connie. We also spent most of our time getting to know each other. A couple points we brought up. Is all countries are treating the internet competitively and as a necessary infrastructure for the 20 many times. Also, what stood out was Purdue's interest and statement for young people in agriculture. We aren't going to keep them on the farm if they don't have today's technology. And then learning about the NTCA was very valuable.
Hi, I'm John. We talked about a few things. We have an electric co-op here that's in discussions with one of the companies that you mentioned earlier, the CTC organization, so a telephone company and a power company having a partnership discussion. I've got 37 years in this industry and worked in lots of the urban areas, and in the early days, partnerships was the only way we could compete with the folks, the incumbents, the big telephone companies and so on that have network everywhere. So we had to combine our efforts and partner together. One of the things we concluded, though, is these partnerships are so critical to the rural areas in enabling and empowering these communities to grow their communities, to educate their children. Some of these communities can't even afford or don't have the ability to have instructors for all the different subjects the kids want to take. And so broadband is absolutely critical. And in today's digital world, without an adequate digital broadband network, they can't compete with the rest of the world. They can't participate in the rest of the world. So it's critical.
Hi, my name is Maureen Eidecker, and at my table of 5, we had 2 that actually have received border-to-border grants already, one for $12.6 million down in Rock County, which is way down in the corner, and then another at Renville County, just south of Wilmer. Our takeaways were from Renville County to be sure and work on educating county residents regarding the future. And she passed on something that was talked about this morning about bandwidth needs doubling and augmented rehabilitation in particular. Of course, when I'm at the table, since I'm a nurse, I kind of bring out the healthcare ideas in people. I don't know why that does that way, but okay. And then an example of the need to support even providers, healthcare providers that are living in rural areas and their spouses. In order to recruit, sometimes, you know, it has to has to be addressed there. And so looking for partners and county support was an idea that Carrie had from Rock County. And then Ryan from Roseau talked about some of the lower hanging fruit is already picked. And so the challenges are really, really big. And so being open to all kinds of ideas is part of it. I didn't have a chance to talk about my idea. I didn't come up with an answer. But I'm looking how to address the opioid crisis with telemedicine and technology across Minnesota. So if you have some ideas, let me know.
Our table talked about the concern that failure to extend networks will ensure decline of rural communities as the next generation refuses to live without good broadband. A recognition of the difficulty in getting profit-driven providers to cooperate and trying to think of what would motivate them. It's understandable that they would want something out of the arrangement, but when money is the issue for the community, what else can they offer? Last was recognizing a tension between the idea of not overbuilding, but also wanting to promote competition. Limiting competition can reduce customer service and responsiveness to the community. That's also added to because there's uncertainty about whether an ISP is going to be regulated as a utility. And if they're not, for example, if net neutrality goes away, does that reduce the value of the internet that is going to be provided to a community?
We have a table of two, so I get to know Brian pretty well here over the last 20 minutes. And we also have Laura at our table here as well. Talked about a number of things. I come from the vendor side, so we talked about both telecom and with the ability of electric utilities and co-ops offering broadband service, kind of the mixing of the two technologies that I think was briefly discussed earlier, but not only providing broadband to the end subscribers, but using that infrastructure to improve the grid, with especially enhancements of the technology with smart grid coming on, meter reading, as well as bringing different sources of energy. So your one-way power plant is now becoming two-way. You need more intelligence in there. We spoke a lot about Leroy, Minnesota. Here's the mayor here, right next to us. So we're lucky to have him, and he talked about his desire to get broadband to his constituents. He has a service provider already. He's trying to get broadband moving faster within his community. And we touched upon a couple of the issues he has to deal with in terms of enabling that in the marketplace. And then finally, we talked a little bit about the passion we saw from the speakers there, that broadband is here, it's really a reality, and we think it's, again, we're like in church, and we're all singing from the same hymn book. We're all believers that broadband is really needed. But that passion came out in the discussion with the group here today.
So like a lot of the other tables, we spent most of the time getting to know each other, and what we found is that we probably represent the three extremes of Minnesota. We have Ely, Southwest Minnesota, and St. Paul at the same table, and each of those presents their own challenges. Some have the broadband and don't understand how to utilize it and leverage it, whereas on the engineering side, once the network is built, we're back into the shadows onto the next thing. So it just helped us realize that there's all different sorts of challenges at all different places throughout the lifespan and even the actual completion of the project. Another thing is that in rural America, there's more and more automation all the time, whether it's mining and forestry or agriculture like where we're from, and that's just going to drive more and more needs throughout for broadband. And the thing that we really, really liked was the concept of the generative partnerships that Kevin had mentioned, and how those it's a longer lasting, better solution for the residents and the company itself.
We touched mostly on the economic development side of things, specifically the Northeast Minneapolis and the starting of a co-op to get the momentum going. It can take something this small to get momentum going, and that was an interesting concept to learn about how that's happening today. If you think of co-ops as kind of being older and around for a long time, here's some that are starting today, and that was very interesting to hear. We also talked about having a partnership and an advocate like NTCA. When you talk about 40% of the land mass with only 5% of the population, that's a challenge, the regulatory challenge, the financial challenges, and to have that advocacy at DC has been a strong point to help us move forward as well.
We talked about a variety of non-related things, but some of the things we did talk about, I think Kevin touched on it, was really when you're looking at partnerships, there's quite a difference between the leadership at some of the different co-ops, even from one telco co-op to a different telco co-op, electrics and the same thing, and really making sure that those cultures are aligned and that your partnerships are built on something that's solid and consistent. Otherwise, it's probably not really going to last. And then the other thing, I had a conversation earlier this morning just talking about adoption, and it's maybe not even so much as getting maybe grandma and grandpa to learn, understand, and embrace some of these sorts of things, but just getting the comfort of actually having that drop plowed to their house sometimes can be a real challenge. So maybe an educational piece there is important when you've got some folks that are nervous about, oh my goodness, you're bringing this new stuff and I'm gonna get hacked and I don't know what that means, but it must be bad. So I think that's something to consider as well. So it's there.
We also got to know one another, and I wrote some things down, but I think I kind of agree on these things. Kevin, we thought you were awesome because you just brought so much emotion. You emoted, and we thought that was great. But what I
sensitive guy.
and I'm learning more about co-ops as we go. But you said that co-ops focus on a community life. They become a sustaining force within a community that helps them grow because they're not extracted, because and I thought that was very important. And I was surprised to learn that Ace Hardware, which is a large corporation, uses a cooperative buying service. So it's in the thread of our nation. And Laura. It's great that your new partnership opportunity, that's just amazing, because that's the key. If you can get the incumbents to find a way to partner, then that's the quick route to do it. And so that's what was exciting to me, and I hope you guys as well, I don't know. But I took exception, I understood your last line, if you don't do it, someone else will. But I took a bit of exception to that, but I know what you mean, because in our area, what we discovered was, if we don't do it, no one else will. I mean, we had to do it ourselves because there wasn't going to be anyone else to do it. So.
Let me just clarify. I was mostly talking to my members when I said that, meaning if my members do not work with others or look for partnerships, somebody else might come in and partner with somebody they should be partnering with to fill a need, and what we're trying to do is give our members some tough love, saying you need to be thinking about this. And if you're not, if you're thinking that you're just going to status quo, keep things the way they are now, you need to think otherwise. So I think I agree with you in that. I think we're saying the same thing.
Just one last table here.
The one thing that we came across, or that kind of resonated with us, and Kevin, if I get the quote wrong, I apologize, but if it was ain't no one coming, right? And we're a table of practitioners, PCs for People, and Community Technology Empowerment Program, trying to help underserved people gain access to technology and training. And no one's knocking us over, pushing us out of the way to do that kind of work. So we're certainly happy that resonated a lot.
Thank you, everybody, for talking and thinking and sharing back. In the few minutes we have left, I'm going to invite first Laura and then Kevin to reflect back on what they heard and any reactions to what people thought about what you had to say.
Well, I think I am very encouraged by the localism of it. And also, I spend a lot of my time looking at how the national media and sometimes the local helping them tell our side of the story. And I have been encouraged, I'll just say over the last 6 months, with how much focus in the media, in Washington, on finding local.
and this vision about partnerships, about how do we leverage the investments that have already been made, how do we leverage the relationships that already are in place, that strikes me as all good. So that's kind of one bucket. Second thing that I heard is the need to communicate and build vision around what this technology offers and what it could do. So we heard everything from telemedicine to how do we provide education for our kids. Heard a story from a person that was in my office last week. The local police couldn't figure out why local middle schoolers were climbing on top of climbing up on the roof at night of the local library. They're trying to catch the signal because this library leaves the servers on, and they can get up there and catch a signal. Now, he also told me about the farmer that was up on the silo waving his phone. Okay, he was trying to catch a signal too. The person on the ground happened to be a person running for office, and the farmer up on the silo said, "Don't you move, I'm coming down, we need to talk." So this whole sense of building alignment and around a vision of what can telecommunications, education, community vitality, all of those things, that's needed. And we need to build that broadly, because if that broad vision is not articulated and understood, we can't get to subscribership, and we can't get to the political will that allows government and other major entities in our communities to buy in. We need to create that sense of this is really important, it needs to happen, we know it can't happen today, we need to be laying the relationships and starting the conversations. And inside of that as well, I heard the conversation over here around the risks, and that takes me to my third bucket. I'm not Pollyanna, and I sing Kumbaya, but not often, okay? Cooperation is hard. And the issues, if this were easy, a lot of things would have already happened, but it's not easy. And so this sense of local solutions, trying to figure out what we got to work with, what we agree on, what are the places of rub and tension that we need to find some grease. It's like that's all part of the work that is to be done, and there's no cookie cutter. There's no one size fits all. So being prepared to wrestle, intellectually anyway, with those kinds of conversations in your communities is part and parcel of what your leadership is about. So in building vision, recognizing risk, figuring out what you can work with and how you can best manage risk, and then figuring out what's right for you in your situations. I think that's what I'm hearing coming out of the conversations.
Wow. Please join me in thanking our two panelists for their... And I hope this is helpful framing for us all to take into the rest of the conference, and there's still a lot ahead. I'm already feeling a little overwhelmed with all of the content that we had so much already today, but there's a lot more to come. So my exhortation to you is get outside, take a walk, enjoy this gorgeous space where we are, because at 5 o'clock we're going to meet again for social hour. We'll have a nice time to continue our conversations, and a social hour, dinner, and a wonderful presentation this evening. That's going to happen right across the street in the Wilson building. Did I get that right, team? Yes? Bay. Wilson Bay, thank you. Wilson Bay at 5 o'clock. Social, yes, there'll be adult beverages available at 5 o'clock. And so enjoy the next couple hours to get checked in. Enjoy the beautiful setting, and we'll see you all back across the street at 5 o'clock. Thanks, everybody.